The Oklahoma House voted overwhelmingly to approve legislation making performing an abortion illegal.
The Supreme Court heard arguments in a case that could spell the end of nearly 50 years of reproductive freedom in the United States.
In Minneapolis, no charges will be filed against the police officer who shot and killed Amir Locke.
Members of Congress remain sharply divided in the aftermath of January 6th.
Closer to civil war than any of us would like to believe.
The world is running out of time.
Almost inevitable that the Earth will surpass the critical threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius.
It's now or never.
The war in Ukraine is sparking fears about nuclear warfare.
Headlines are written. Politicians in power and the media parrot words of threat and violence, sometimes covered over with honeyed words of democracy, peace, and justice to delude, confuse, and pacify you. The future is being written, that's real. So real that it could be truthfully said that what is happening now portends a future that is no future fit for full human beings and which really could be no future at all. This must be faced. But that need not be the end of the story. It must only be the beginning. It is but the stage we inhabit, the stage we act on. The rest of the story is unwritten. This is the future that this system is careening to, but there are questions. Questions that need to be brought and fought to the surface. Questions of for whom and for what. Who will write that future? And what should that future be? Almost 60 years ago, Paul Simon wrote these words. Listen to this haunting and powerful version by the metal band Disturbed 7 years ago.
And the sign flashed out his warning, and the words that it was forming. And the sign said the words on the prophets are written on the subway walls, and tenement halls, and whispered in the sun. Of silence.
The words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls, whispered in the sounds of silence. Today, if you listen and look, what the song calls the sounds of silence can be heard in the deep, often suppressed yearning for a different world by the millions in this country and billions around the world who bear the brunt of this system's brutal exploitation and oppression. The rage, often suppressed, that bursts forth repeatedly over decades and centuries against white supremacy, patriarchy, the hatred of refugees, and now the destruction of the environment and the reality of war and the threat of still greater war. The latent anger, the suppressed and repressed yearning to be free from the prison of this world and to live fully as human beings must be silent no more. It is time and past time for those for whom this system offers no future but a living hell to speak up, to act up, to rise up, to fight for a radically different world. All whose frustrations and angers, whose hopes and dreams are written on the subway walls and tenement halls, all who are trapped in a desperate life in the ghettos, the barrios, the prisons, all who catch the hardest hell from this system, youth who look out at the world and see their future in peril, and every decent person, every dreamer who feels deep in their bones that the horrors of today must not be all that there is. Now is the time to be silent no more. To all of you, welcome to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. This is our 96th episode on April 7th, 2022. My name is Andy Z, and I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Every week, the RNL show brings to you the work and the leadership of the revolutionary thinker and leader Bob Avakian, B.A., who has developed the path to a real revolution for the emancipation of all humanity. Bob Avakian has made the powerful analysis that at this moment in history, there is a way forward. That today, out of the immense divide in U.S. society, out of the extremely negative future that looms, there is the possibility of something really positive. At the top of our website, revcom.us, there is the introduction to a major work that analyzes why this is so and how this is so, and it provides concrete leadership. I've said many times on this show that the title of this work tells you a lot, and that title is this: Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating. Profound crisis, deepening divisions, the looming possibility of civil war, and the revolution that is urgently needed. A necessary foundation, a basic roadmap for this revolution. In this work, Bob Avakian brings the liberating potential of today, why there is the possibility of making and winning a real revolution for a new socialist society. Listen to this work. Read this work, discuss it. Now, each of the headlines with which we began today's show reveals the great divide in this country. At the top of society, it is between the fascist Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Both represent and rule over the system that dominates the whole world today, the system of capitalism, imperialism, a dog-eat-dog system marked by ruthless competition that gives rise to and perpetuates the exploitation, oppression, and all the fucked up social relations and problems which plague humanity today. On the world stage, this leads to wars. The divide in the United States runs from top to bottom. The specter of civil war is increasingly invoked. The divide reaches down to how people think and live and die, the COVID pandemic, a case in point. Today, teachers and schools, parents and kids are under siege as to whether or not students will be allowed to learn the true history of this country, founded in slavery and the theft and near extermination of the native peoples. There is no longer common ground. The Republican Party has become a fascist party and is working to fully bludgeon into place a completely, violently white supremacist, male-dominated society without any pretense or camouflage of civil or democratic rights. The Democrats offer little serious resistance, for they too rule over this setup that they must maintain, even as they may try to smooth out the edges. But you can see their fangs in the fact that police continue to murder people of color at the same rate as before the rising of millions of people in 2020 to the police murder of George Floyd, and the very fact that today the police still are rarely made to pay for their crimes. In Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating, Bob Avakian writes, quote, "The crisis and deep divisions in society can only be resolved through radical means of one kind or another, either radically reactionary and murderously oppressive and destructive means, or radically emancipating and revolutionary means. With all this, what is urgently needed, what is possible, and what must be actively, tirelessly worked for in order for there to be a truly positive outcome to all of this is a fundamentally different alignment in the country as a whole, a repolarization that is favorable for and brings forward the necessary forces for revolution, a real revolution to overthrow this system and bring into being a radically different and much better system." End quote. What is meant by repolarization for revolution? It means that people see more than the two futures that the fascist Republicans and the Democrats offer. Instead of the future that those who rule this system being the only future that people know of and see as possible, there is a growing force that represents another future, a revolutionary future, with a different form of rule, a different economic system, and radically different values aiming for the emancipation of humanity. They see a powerful and growing force for revolution who impact and change how people see things and how every institution has to respond. They see a force with a plan who are organizing now to overthrow the system of capitalism and to put in its place a radically different and far better system, socialism, as envisioned in the Constitution for a new socialist republic in North America, a constitution that is authored by Bob Avakian. Look at the existential crises that confront humanity, like global warming, or that of millions and millions of migrants being driven from their countries and from their homes, or the horrific exploitative conditions that literally grinds up hundreds of millions of lives in order to produce everything we consume, from our clothes to our iPhones. Today, we are excited on the RNL show to announce that this coming Monday, April 11th, we are beginning the serialization of a new interview with Bob Avakian that addresses these questions and much more. He vividly and deeply shows what kind of liberating society the Constitution for a new socialist republic could open up in opposition to all that is today under this capitalist imperialist system. The contrast is stark. Not production for profit with oil and gas exploiting millions around the planet and poisoning the future for billions, but sustainable socialist development, meeting the needs of the people and taking care of the planet. A society not driving migrants from the third world into the seas to drown and into the deserts to die, but welcoming all those who want to contribute to a radically and different new world. Not a world where people cancel and block each other, but where they learn from and value the richness of our diversity. Not a world of lies and justifications for the system's brutality, but a world where the search for truth is integral to getting to a world without exploitation and oppression. This is the concrete vision laid out in the Constitution of the new socialist republic authored by Bob Avakian, which is brought to life in this interview that will be on RevCom on Monday, April 11th. To actually achieve this vision requires a real revolution involving millions of people to overthrow the system. Something terrible or something truly emancipating tells why and how this is possible and puts forth this objective, quote, "Everything we are doing now is aiming for depends on bringing forward a revolutionary people from among the most bitterly oppressed in all parts of society, first in the thousands and then in the millions, as a powerful revolutionary force," end quote. Right now, a big focus of the work of the RevComs as an important part of carrying out this roadmap from something terrible or something truly emancipating is focused on building a very broad movement to oppose and to stop the U.S. Supreme Court from overturning or gutting the legal constitutional right of women to have an abortion. I want to play a short video that the RNL show crew put together based on an article from Bob Avakian that crisply and sharply concentrates what the battle for abortion rights is all about.
The fight for abortion rights and the emancipation of women. The essential question at stake with the escalating attack on the right to abortion is the fundamental status of the half of humanity that is female, whether they will be enslaved or emancipated. Of course, in the case of the extremely small number of females who have transitioned or are transitioning to males, but who retain female reproductive organs and might get pregnant, they should have the right to abortion and to decent health care overall, without any stigma or discrimination. And in general, attacks directed against trans people must be actively, vigorously opposed. But in terms of its essential purpose and objective, the attack on the right to abortion is not aimed at trans people. The essence of what is involved is not inclusion or the lack of inclusion, nor is this about bodily autonomy in some general and abstract sense, a concept which, by the way, would logically include people coming from a very bad place, such as those anti-scientific lunatics and selfish individualists who refuse to get vaccinated against COVID. The attack on the right to abortion is a move to further intensify the already horrific oppression of women, denying them control of their lives and their very bodies, reducing them to breeders of children, cruelly subordinated to men and a patriarchal male supremacist society. Forced motherhood is in fact female enslavement. Anything which waters down or distracts from this essential truth is objectively aiding this fundamental attack on the half of humanity that is female, is undermining the fight for their emancipation and the emancipation of humanity as a whole from any form of oppression and exploitation.
So, with that as a foundation, I want to welcome the co-host of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, Sunsara Taylor, who is in New York, where she has been leading, along with others, Rise Up for Abortion Rights. Sunsara, welcome.
Andy, it's really good to be with you. Thank you.
Okay, Sunsara, I'd like to start our discussion by discussing why this battle matters, why we as RevComs, revolutionary communists, are taking this fight up, including what it has to do with bringing forward a revolutionary people and getting to a place where there is not just a slippery slope to a terrible fascist future, but a victory through a hard-fought and serious struggle, bringing forward many people who want to become part of that determined revolutionary people. So there's 3 points you and I discussed earlier, and I'll just mention the first one, and then we can get into it. One, building a movement of millions in this determined, sustained struggle that actually defeats the attempt to overturn or to gut Roe versus Wade would really mean for women's lives, in opposition to what would happen if we lost this struggle, especially without a fight, where the state could force women to bear a child against her will in defiance of her health. So this is what I think we should get into first.
Yeah, well, I think we did just hear in that short piece from Bob Avakian the concentrated reality that whether women are denied the right to abortion, whether this right is ripped away from them, is really right now a concentration point as to whether women are going to be enslaved or emancipated. And that is what's at stake in this battle. Whether the state is going to reduce women to incubators, breeders of children, forced to have children against their will, or whether women and others are going to rise up and unleash their fury against this and beat this attack back through massive struggle, through tapping into the suppressed fury of women up against all the insult and abuse and violence that is heaped on them, and that would be furthered by this right being taken away, to really shake up all of society and defeat this assault and force the Supreme Court to back up off this decision that is looming and not take this right away. But I think an additional thing to understand that's very important is that this fight over women and the right to abortion is a very central part of a larger fight in terms of what kind of society and what kind of people we're going to be. And I think it'd be good for you to talk a little bit about that as well.
This is our second point. What a tremendous difference it will make for there to be a determined people, women and men, standing up to power, fighting to win, to actually defeat the attempt of the Supreme Court to take away this right. And I just have to say to our audience, that is possible to do. This Supreme Court and all these Supreme Courts pay a lot of attention to what's happening in society overall. And there's a lot of turmoil among sections of the rulers of whether or not they're going to win or lose the allegiance of masses of people here. And if we would win this struggle, through thousands initially, then millions of people taking this up and filling the street week after week, and where the whole society, where people taking a stand if they're wearing green, this will develop a tremendous moral power for people to see our collective struggle against the world that is and the world, and bring him into being the world that could be. And, you know, many times on the show, we have shown the faces of women from Latin America who've taken up this battle and won against Christian fundamentalist states. And you see it in their faces, you see it in their body language. And it's the beginning of a development of really a deep political awareness, a questioning, a determination that would set a course for many to uproot all manners of patriarchy and the system that gives rise to it, versus, on the other hand, a defeated people who've given up, who find their way to adjust to it, who are and become what we called, and was called popularly in the wake of the World War II, the German people, who were good Germans and allowed the Jews to be taken to the concentration camps, allowed the gypsies to be exterminated, and allowed this tremendous horror to take place. Instead, we would have a people who are on the move and struggling for a brighter future.
You know, Andy, last weekend I was out with the Rise Up for Abortion Rights crew in New York City, and we were spreading the green, the symbol of abortion rights, in Union Square and reaching out to people and involving them. And one of the people that we met was a woman from Argentina, where abortion was criminalized for many, many years, as it is in most of Latin America. And it was in Argentina that they first popularized the green bandana for abortion rights. And she immediately recognized the symbol and came over and joined in. And I interviewed her, including asking her what lessons she would share with people in America from that struggle in Argentina. I think that there's quite a bit to learn from what she said. I'd like to play it right now.
My family's from Argentina, and abortion was just made legal there recently. And the idea that we left a country to go to somewhere where we could make a better life, and in the country that we came to, abortion is going to be made illegal. It's possible that a woman's right to choose will be taken away on a federal level.
And what are the lessons you think for people in this country that you can bring from the struggle in Argentina, the Green Wave?
I think there's two sides. One of them is you're never too advanced for shit to go backwards. I don't know if I can say that, right?
You can say that.
You're never too advanced for it to go back to a place or to be in a country that's unrecognizable. A lot of countries in Latin America has said, oh, dictatorships can't happen here. Just desaparecidos who disappeared can't happen here. We're too educated, we're too liberal, we're too anything. And they've seen fascist, dictatorships take over their country. So if there's one thing, it's like, it can never happen here. That's not a true statement. And secondly is that if you allow things to happen without standing up, then they just happen without you knowing them. And it's a lot easier to keep a law that we have on the book than it is to fight to change a law that has already taken away the rights for women. So it's one thing to stand and to say, we need this law to stay and the right for a woman to choose to remain federally legal. But if that right is taken away, it becomes a lot harder to then go back and undo the damage that's been done.
I think it's really important, Sunsara. A world without the right to abortion is going to be a nightmare. It's going to be a leap, and it's going to be an impetus to a fascist patriarchal program, a white supremacist program, and an entire fascist juggernaut. But if we win it, it's going to be a tremendous impetus for people to change everything. Women will be able to breathe in a different way, and the whole society would come alive. I just think we should spend just a couple of minutes on this before we go to Xochitl from the Bay Area Revolution Club.
Yeah, I think it's very important for people to understand that the Christian fascist program and the Christian fascist movement, which is now at the core of what is a fully fascist Republican Party, and it's a Christian fascism that has a dominant position on the Supreme Court and in many state legislatures across this country. It is deadly serious about criminalizing abortion everywhere. They're not going to be satisfied with a patchwork of states, some of which have abortion rights, some of which don't. They are going state by state and at a federal level to end abortion rights, and they're coming for birth control. And they're coming for LGBTQ rights. And they're coming for a whole host of other rights and foundational things that people take for granted today. The level of assault that will be accelerated, including the white supremacy that's woven into all of this in this country, is going to be so severe. People need to understand you need to draw a line now to defend this right to abortion for the lives of women, for what it will mean for women, but also as a bulwark and a rallying point against the entire fascist assault and to build up the strength on the side of the people to defeat this fascism as a whole, and to build momentum and strength on the people's side and understanding on the people's side to go further towards something truly emancipating, getting deeper into the roots of this and this system. We need to wake a lot of people up to the need for revolution and organize them into that. That's not the same as the struggle to defeat the attack on abortion, but it is related, and it does get to the root. And so there's a lot at stake, and a lot of direction gets set in how this battle over abortion goes down.
Yeah, that's right. And on the positive side, you've just brought out, we'd be in a whole other position to go forward and wage the fight for against the next thing that these fascists are doing and that the ruling class in this country is doing. We'll be talking later on in the show about the dangers in this war in Ukraine and other things that are happening in society, the white supremacy, all this stuff. They'll be strengthened for all of this. There'll be people's solidarity with each other will be different. Their understanding of the world, and there'll be a sense where right now there's so much, including in the wake of the pandemic and the insanity of the anti-science approach that among so many, that empty feeling that people have, that despair people have will be lifted, and you'll have a different kind of people who could go forward, people who want to have a world that is fit for humanity, and they actually want to have a world itself and not destroyed by this system. So with that, I think we should go to Xochitl, who sent in this video that's sort of extraordinary in her car, and she's just on fire.
Hey, what's up, fam out there in Instagram land? I'm Xochitl with the Revolution Club Bay Area. Look, we got 2 days until April 8th, which is Friday, the call for people around the country to sport these green bandanas or a green armband. And the reason we're pushing this out so hard is just what I heard on the news right now on the daily, right? Oklahoma has just signed legislation to ban abortion. And so they follow Texas and Mississippi and Arkansas and going forward to Idaho and all these other places that are not only just banning abortion, right? Telling women that you have no rights, that anybody is bound to respect, that if you want to decide when and how you're going to carry and give birth to a child, you don't get to make that decision. Your life, your future, your dreams, your hopes are foreclosed on. What is that? What chilling situations that create in the society where women are essentially slaves. And the Revolution Club has been putting that out. If you are not taking a stand and fighting actively to defend women's right and access to abortion in this country, then you are saying, I am down, I'm supporting, I am letting this happen. It's okay that women are on their knees and enslaved. And let's be clear just about how brutal and vicious these laws are that give you a sense of what they're really after, right? Some lies about life and babies. These laws put bounties on anybody who helps women. So all this talk about how we're gonna create a underground railroad and we're gonna help women travel from state to state. First of all, they're going state to state and banning it. And then second of all, these laws have bounties that put $10,000 fines on anybody who helps a woman. My question is, if you won't step up and wear the green, right? Are you telling me that you're going to then risk all these bounties and these attacks and these laws, right? Look, people don't know what's happening, right? And we're out here, we're shouting, we're screaming because people can know, right? And we can bring them the truth. And part of creating the sea of green, right? Imagine thousands, millions of people around the country wearing this. We take up this green bandana because of the tremendous hard-fought struggles in Latin America, in Colombia, in Argentina, and Mexico, and places that struggled for, in the midst of these suffocating, highly Catholic regimes, fought for and won the right to abortion. And they took up this symbol, and we're taking it up here. And so what is the call, right? What is the call if you don't agree that women's access to abortion should be completely overturned, which is coming? The Mississippi law is going to the Supreme Court this summer. And what do you think that Trump, white supremacist, fascist, theocratic Supreme Court is going to do? They're going to overturn it. They think women are property, are incubators, should be slaves. And I'll call out to everybody who came out 2 summers ago, righteous and powerful in our millions for Black Lives Matter. Who do you think this law is going to target the worst? It's going to target the worst. Poor women, Black women. You know, they did stories recently of women in Texas. A woman, she already had a child, right? And she was trying to get her life together, her and her husband, right? And she'd just gotten a job and they were pulling together and she got pregnant and they could not do it financially, time-wise, for the sake of her future. And she wanted to have an abortion and she couldn't. And she cried on that show. And you felt the pain. And so I asked people, right? If the woman was sitting next to you bawling and crying about her future, would you act? If it was your child or your sister bawling and crying, would you act? Right? This isn't just about what happens in California. This is what happens to people all over this country, and it's happening right now. In the case of rape, these laws say you still have to have the abortion. And if your rapist isn't in jail, your rapist can sue you if you try. And if he is in jail, his family can sue you. That's how sick and vicious these laws are. And they're coming for birth control. Some of these laws say RU46, the morning after pill, is drug trafficking, right? They are shutting down any means. And if we sit by and don't stand up, and don't take up the green, and don't come out in the streets on April 9th, then we are letting it happen, and we are saying that women are the property of men and this system and no future. And what does that have to do with the revolution, right? You know, the Revolution Club, we say, break the chains, unleash the fury of women as a mighty force for revolution.
Okay, so that was Xochitl from the Bay Area Revolution Club. It was powerful. She brought out what people need to be doing this weekend if you're watching this before the 9th of April, and what we need to be doing going forward. Sunsara, you've talked to me about what the Rise Up for Abortion Rights movement has identified as 2 important things that they need to be doing and the people need to be doing over the next months to really break this battle into the open and bring forward the necessary thousands and then millions.
Yeah, Andy, one of the things that we have learned as we have taken this fight out across the country, pretty much everywhere, is that a shocking number of people, overwhelmingly people in this society, don't know that the Supreme Court is actively weighing on track to take away abortion rights. Most people are completely ignorant that this is looming, including the people who will be affected by it and including the people who need to be mobilized to stand up to stop it. So riseupforabortionrights.org is really calling on people to take the message. The U.S. Supreme Court is on track to take away abortion rights. Only the people can stop this. We need to rise up and take to the streets for abortion rights now. To take this message, abortion on demand and without apology, forced motherhood is female enslavement, out everywhere. And make it completely unignorable, and to spread the green in a way where everybody is forced to pick a side and show what side you're on and know what it means. And we are calling on people to do this in ways that are unignorable, that go in the face of the fascists, that go in ways that put something on the line and get in the media, go viral on social media, things that really, that are in line with the stakes of female enslavement. We're going to play a clip in just a minute of something very, very positive, very good, very righteous that was done in Los Angeles by people with Rise Up for Abortion Rights and the Revolution Club. They're going and interrupting Coney Barrett, Supreme Court member who is a Christian fascist fanatic, as she spoke at the Ronald Reagan Library, and called her out for the enslavement of women, for being anti-abortion. We need a lot more like this. And we need to do all kinds of creative things that force people to see the stakes and to tune in and provoke them to pick a side. And we need a lot of creativity. Xochitl talked about what the green bandana means. We need a lot of creativity to spread this in very captivating ways, in ways that are defiant, that spark the imagination, that make people go, what's that about? I need one of those too. And there are big ways and smaller ways, but a lot of creative ways to get this out in a very mass way to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, get it seen by millions, because the people who need to defeat this assault largely don't know about it yet. And that's on us to reach them.
So let's show this short video of the disruption of Amy Coney Barrett at the Ronald Reagan Library in California.
We're out here with Rise Up for Abortion Rights because Amy Coney Barrett is speaking tonight at the Ronald Reagan Library. And we came here to deliver a message.
Coney Barrett, you are an enslaver of women.
Amy Coney Barrett is an enslaver of women.
You are a Christian fascist who has an agenda to enslave women.
If women do not have the right to control when and whether to have children, they are no more than breeders and incubators. They are no more than handmaids. The Supreme Court, which Amy Coney Barrett is on, is set to overturn the right to abortion in less than 2 months. And it is only the people that can stop this. Get in the streets, raise the green, and raise hell!
Rise up for abortion rights, for abortion rights, rise up!
Rise up!
Rise up for abortion rights, for abortion rights, rise up!
Rise up!
We need more of that. You have to get out there. When Sunsara said before, from Rise Up for Abortion Rights, that only the people can win that, guess what? All of you watching this are part of those people. Okay, good luck, Sunsara, this weekend, and we'll see you next week on the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. In episode 94 of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, we went into the danger that looms as the United States with its NATO bloc and Russia are squaring off in the war in Ukraine, heightening the possibility of a nuclear war with the existential threat that presents. In relation to this, we're going to share an excerpt from Bob Avakian's 2005 memoir, From Ike to Mao and Beyond, that he reads in his own voice. He speaks about a major event in the history of this country and the world known as the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. At this point in Bob Avakian's young life, he was recovering from a serious and life-threatening illness, but he was paying close attention to important events like this. Again, at a time when the war in Ukraine has called up the danger of nuclear war, there are important lessons to draw from this, and from Bob Avakian's approach at that time to what his government was telling people.
President Kennedy's urgency in launching his blockade underlined a determination to prevent at almost any cost Cuba's missile buildup.
The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere.
The Cuban Missile Crisis. World in the balance.
Once again, the White House and the executive it shelters commands the interest of the world. Attention that's riveted on the signing by President Kennedy, Cuba.
During the acute period of the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, those events and their implications loom much larger, even in my own mind, than my own situation of being sick. Everybody sensed to one degree or another, certainly anybody who was paying any attention, and most people were, they couldn't help it, that the world could literally end at any time. I still remember feeling very, very deeply, right down into my bones, that the whole world could come to an end. At that time, I was back on a restricted schedule in school, but I followed this whole thing very intensely. Of course, they always give you only the U.S. imperialist side of the picture, and that's what people get drummed into them. I remember this dramatic incident that they still like to replay from time to time, when Adlai Stevenson, who was the U.S. representative to the United Nations, gave this speech where he showed these photos of the Soviet missiles that had been brought into Cuba. And then he turned to the Soviet ambassador and said, "Are those or are those not Soviet missiles in Cuba?"
Yes or no? Don't wait for the translation, yes or no?
"I can wait here till hell freezes over, Mr. Ambassador."
I'm prepared to wait for my answer until hell freezes over.
The Soviet ambassador wouldn't answer, and Stevenson just kept saying, "Are they or aren't they, Mr. Ambassador?" On and on like that, putting him on the spot. But they never show how a year before that, at the beginning of the Kennedy administration, Adlai Stevenson got up and vehemently denied in the United Nations that the U.S. had anything to do with the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba.
These charges are totally false, and I deny them categorically.
Which, of course, was a blatant lie. So they like to show the one thing on TV as a highlight from history, but not the other thing where Stevenson was overtly lying in front of the whole world. At the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy put a naval blockade around Cuba and said that if any Soviet ship tried to break that blockade, that would be an act of war, and the U.S. would respond. Kennedy tried to justify this, and I remember this very clearly, by claiming that the Soviet Union had violated the UN Charter by putting missiles in Cuba.
In flagrant and deliberate defiance of the Rio Pact of 1947, the traditions of this nation and hemisphere, the joint resolution of the 87th Congress, the Charter of the United Nations.
Now, even though I had a lot of suspicions about the government already at that time, and even though I was very angry about a lot of injustices in American society, and especially the oppression of black people, I still wanted to believe in my government. I still wanted to believe that the government could at least be brought around to doing the right thing. And I didn't want to believe that on something where literally the fate of the world was involved, they would just openly lie to everybody. But I felt strongly, with the fate of the world up for grabs and hanging by a thread, that I have to know the truth here. So I went to the university library and I dug out the UN Charter, remembering that Kennedy said it was a violation of the UN Charter for the Soviet Union to have missiles in Cuba. I read the whole charter through, and I naively expected I would find a statement in the charter that would say, "It is a violation of this charter for the Soviet Union to have missiles in Cuba." Of course, I didn't find anything of the kind. So then I started looking into it further. Well, does it say it's a violation for one country to put missiles into another country? Of course, there wasn't anything like that in the charter either. And as I later found out, the U.S. had missiles all over the place, including in Turkey. And even though the ones in Turkey were older generation missiles, they were still missiles that could set off nuclear devices. These missiles in Turkey were closer to the Soviet border than Cuba was to the U.S. border. But they weren't talking about that either in the U.S. media. I kept looking for anything in this UN Charter that would justify what Kennedy was saying about how this was a violation of the Charter. I read that Charter over and over, and I couldn't find anything. Kennedy was just lying. He was really saying, we can do whatever we want, and nobody can do anything we don't want them to do. That was the logic he was using then, and that's the logic that right up to Bush they use now. Some of my favorite lines from Bob Dylan are in the song where he talks about trying to get in a nuclear fallout shelter, and the owner says, "Get out of here. I'll tear you limb from limb." Then the next lines are, "I said, you know, they refused Jesus too. He said, you're not him." The way of thinking or not thinking that Dylan captured there. The inability or unwillingness to engage in abstract thought and to abstract from one situation to another. The refusal to be consistent in applying a principle. What applies to you doesn't apply to me. I can do what I want, and you can't do it if I don't want you to. That same sort of "you're not him" or "you're not me" logic was being applied by Kennedy. And this was a big shock to me. I knew some things about injustices in American society, but lying on this level, lying before the world with the fate of the world literally at stake, was more than I expected. It may have been unusual to actually go and pore through the UN Charter, but there was so much at stake that I felt like I have to know the truth, and just because it's the leader of my country, I can't accept what he says when something this big is at stake. Of course, this didn't immediately cause me to become a communist. I was still against communism as much as I understood it, which was very little. But it shook me up a lot and kept circulating in my mind as other events, like Vietnam a little later, unfolded. The Cuban Missile Crisis and things like the fair housing struggle contributed to my feeling that there were important things in the world, and I should do something about those things. I should do something important with my life when I got my life back. I still had the passion that I had for sports and things like that, but that was something you do for entertainment and fun. I mean, your life could be about that, and I always thought that if I hadn't ended up being a communist, Maybe I would have been a high school basketball coach. But I was feeling that my life should be about something more than sports, as much as I still had a real passion about that. I felt that there were so many big things going on in the world. I wanted to do something with my life that would mean something, or to use the phrase of the time, be relevant, and not just be a personal passion for me.
That was Bob Avakian from his memoir. There are lessons B.A. draws from this that are relevant for what we are facing at this moment. How the world was brought to the brink of nuclear war, and how the U.S. President John Kennedy and all the media lied to draw the people of this country to support what the United States was doing. But even more important to learn from is the approach that B.A. took of not being satisfied or fooled by the statements of his own government, even when he wanted them to be counted on to tell the truth, for something so consequential for humanity. He dug deep to find out what was true, and this has been an important hallmark of Bob Avakian as he developed as a communist leader. And this determination, always to dig beneath the surface to get at the truth, and confront reality as it is, without being cowed by public opinion, stands out as a key aspect of the new communism that he has developed and which characterizes his leadership overall. I want to encourage all of you to read this memoir. It's very deep on lessons from that period, and it's very deep on lessons of methodology. This past week, President Biden said that President Putin of Russia should face a war crimes trial for alleged atrocities in Ukraine. Next, a frequent contributor to the RNL show, Lenny Wolff, who's a writer for Revcom.us and an advocate for Bob Avakian and the new communism, shines a light on these accusations. Lenny brings a scientific approach to evaluating this propaganda and the underlying reality of the war in Ukraine.
The 64th Grammy Awards have taken place in Las Vegas, but the standout moment didn't come from a musician. President Volodymyr Zelensky made a surprise appearance via a pre-recorded video message.
What's more opposite to music? The silence of ruined cities and killed people.
John Legend followed with a performance alongside Ukrainian musicians.
President Zelensky made an impassioned plea to the United Nations to do more to stop Russian war crimes.
President Biden, he just weighed in. He is now calling for a war crimes trial against Vladimir Putin.
He is a war criminal. Today, I want to make three extremely important points about the war in Ukraine, a situation which grows more ugly and more dangerously explosive with every passing day. First, you should not take at face value anything you are being told by your government or its press about war crimes in Ukraine. Second, even if the Russians are doing everything the media claims they are doing and worse, and this is very possible, it does not come anywhere close to what America has either done or supported in places like Iraq, Vietnam, Guatemala, El Salvador, Afghanistan, and right down to Yemen today. And third, this whole campaign around Russian war crimes is making the danger of nuclear war much worse than it has been for a long time. A war that could conceivably wipe out humanity. On the first point, the American ruling class and its media have a long history of making up pretexts for going to war, including, but not limited to, Iraq, where Colin Powell went before the United Nations to claim that the Iraqis were developing weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not assertions. These are facts, corroborated by many sources.
Which was later proven to be a total hoax. And there's a whole list of similar lies that have been used by America to justify its wars of aggression all over the planet, including in Vietnam, where an estimated 3 million people were killed So, while the Russians may well be carrying out war crimes, and because they're an imperialist army, it is not unlikely that they are, and there does seem to be some independent verification of this, you should not be trusting what the ruling class media, the New York Times, CBS, CNN, Fox, whoever, is going to tell you about this. Second, even if the Russians are doing everything Biden and CNN and all the rest say they are, this does not begin to compare to the gruesome, sadistic, sickening war crimes that America has proudly committed. And not just one country, not just two countries, but dozens of countries, just counting back to World War II, Hiroshima, Iraq, Vietnam, Guatemala, Laos, El Salvador, Congo, Afghanistan, Lebanon. Again, the list is long, and just saying the names doesn't begin to capture the horror and the extent of what was inflicted on people by your government. Go to revcom.us right after the show to find out more. In a piece going up tonight, USA, #1 in war crimes, lies, and hypocrisy. There's a huge difference in how those wars and the war in Ukraine is being covered. The difference is that in these wars, the media, with very few exceptions, did not cover the war crimes that the U.S. was committing. Last Sunday, to take one example, they actually had Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, address the audience for the Grammy Award.
The war. What's more opposite to music? The silence of ruined cities and killed people.
And then John Legend sang a song in support of Ukraine. Well, during the time when the United States was carrying out a much more horrendous war in Vietnam, they didn't let Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the Vietnamese forces that were fighting to rid Vietnam of U.S. domination, address the Grammy Awards. And they didn't allow or encourage artists like John Legend to promote songs on those award shows that would lead you to support the Vietnamese. Again, the source of the difference is that the fight being waged by Ukraine to oust the Russians, which is a just fight in its own right, dovetails with American imperialist interests. The imperialists can use it. But in Vietnam, the struggle, which went on for years, was a struggle against the monsters that rule your country. Finally, what Biden is saying with all his talk of war criminal,
have a war crime trial,
and Putin shouldn't be in charge of Russia,
this man cannot remain in power.
And what Zelensky is doing with his traveling roadshow to whip up pro-war hysteria and get more and more powerful armaments is extremely dangerous. Both Russia and America reserve the right to use nuclear weapons, even when they have not been attacked with nuclear weapons. In other words, if a war being waged by conventional means is going badly for them, each of these powers reserves the right to escalate things into a nuclear conflict. And if one power uses a nuclear bomb, the other power will almost certainly respond in kind. And then things can go to a point of horror beyond anything we've ever seen, including global extinction. Russia has said that if the existence of their state is threatened, they would use nuclear weapons to defend themselves. So when Biden says things like, Putin doesn't deserve to rule, or Putin's a war criminal, Russia remembers that America has both a long and a very recent history of overthrowing governments that get in the way of their interests. They did this in Libya in 2012, for instance. They got NATO, in fact, in that case too, to claim that they were going in to restore peace. And before you knew it, the president, Gaddafi, had been lynched in the street, and a new government, much more friendly to American interests, had been installed. The Russians and the U.S. are and have been locked in a high-stakes battle for influence and control of Europe. And this is the latest chapter of what has been increasingly intense contention. Put two and two together and think of the implications. Russia has told everybody that if America tries to overthrow their government, they will use nukes. Meanwhile, Biden and the people around him know that, and they still go right ahead, willing to risk the continued existence of humanity itself to pursue U.S. imperial interests. Yes, there's intentional ambiguity about how Biden and the people around him are doing it, but they are doing it, and it's very risky. Think about it. Research it. Go to RevCom and then, yes, go to the mainstream press and listen to what they say and to what they don't say. Think critically. Then get with the RevComs to spread the truth on this. And if you can get to Los Angeles or New York this May 1st, come out with us. Put out the real truth about the interests driving this war. Put out the real stakes to what is going on now. And most of all, stand for and call people forward to the only solution to this insanity. Revolution, here and in every corner of the world.
Our final segment is a brief commentary by Noche Diaz, the national spokesperson for the Revolution Clubs. Noche brings out an important point from an article on revcom.us on Will Smith's slap in the face of Chris Rock, a presenter at the Academy Awards, that has sparked a roiling controversy.
You've seen it, or at least you've heard about it. Will Smith's infamous slap of Chris Rock at the Oscars. While shouting, "Keep my wife's name out of your fucking mouth."
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth!
This kind of treating of women as infants who need to be protected from hearing anything offensive, and this kind of view that men's role is to be protectors who violently control what is allowed to be said about their woman, their wife. This is all played out, and it is part of a disgusting and oppressive culture and social relations amongst people that leads to tremendous violence against women and a world of profound divisions and inequalities. And right now, this slap, Will Smith's justifications for it, have thrown up all kinds of questions amongst masses of people about what kind of people do we need to be? What kind of values do we need to promote? What kind of relations between men and women need to be fought for? And what kind of world do we want to live in? And it has to be said, the slap itself, the justifications, and all the people who have been celebrating or defending what Will Smith did as an expression of love or as a righteous act in defense of black women. This is just patriarchal garbage of asserting men's dominion over women, and it is a pitiful showing of the dominant culture's suffocating and degrading view of love. Now, for what it's worth, Will Smith has said in his apology to Chris Rock that he is a work in progress and that what he did was wrong and that he, allowed violence to overtake his reason. It's a very good thing when someone wants to confront the ways of thinking and acting that have led them to being a violent enforcer of oppressive relations. But to make good on that, we have to confront that what went on was not simply violence overcoming reason, but a reasoning that led to the violence. The reasoning that men have to be protectors of women. The reasoning that love makes you do crazy things, including acting like a brutish, thick-headed bully that has to control what is allowed to be said about your woman. This reasoning is the same reasoning that comes out of the mouths of men who carry out tremendous violence at home, on the streets, against millions of women everywhere in society. It is part of the world that we need to get beyond. And this is why everybody needs to dive into this controversy and really confront, struggle against, and break with these ways of thinking, these reasonings that lead to these kinds of oppressive relations and the world that we want to really get free from. And this kind of struggle is part of becoming the people we do need to be. Revolutionary role models who are fighting for a world beyond all forms of oppression. So I'm calling on you. Go to revcom.us. Get into the article 2 Points on Will Smith's Slap. Become part of debating out and struggling with what kind of values to promote. A lot of people have a lot of questions they've been asking, some from a bad place, but some people who are honestly trying to figure out what kind of people do we need to be, what kind of values to promote, and what kind of relations amongst people do we need to be fighting for. People have questions about, what about protecting Black women? What about how do you show your love when someone is insulted that you care about? These are the kinds of things that we need to be talking about, even as we reject and renounce becoming enforcers of oppressive relations.
So that brings us to the end of episode number 96 of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show today on April 7th, 2022. We're going to close this show with a medley of clips, excerpts from the protest on International Women's Day for Rise Up for Abortion Rights. But before we go to that clip, I want to once again urge all of you to write to us at therevcoms@gmail.com to become a Patreon and to support this show. And most of all, to discuss this show with your friends, your family, your coworkers, and to spread it through social media. There's a tremendous gap between what we bring on this show that people so urgently need and the size of our audience. We can only break through that with your help by spreading this show on your social media, talking it up at school or at work or in your neighborhood, and putting up signs for people to watch the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. See you next week.
Not the church, not the state. Women must decide their fate.
We are done being polite. We are done feeling hopeless and fearing that our right to abortion could be taken away at any moment. So let's all keep up this fucking fight, because it's gonna be a long one, but it's important.
They must not be allowed to shatter the lives of women and slam history backwards.
If the Supreme Court thinks we're gonna be bystanders while they take our rights away, they are mistaken.
There's a direct through line between these terrorist trolls and the Christian fascist supermajority on the Supreme Court.
I'm here today on behalf of Iranian women to warn you to take fascism and the power of religious institutions seriously.
I am sick of fascism and hate. I am sick of patriarchy. No one, no man, no church, no state has the right to tell me, to tell you what we can and cannot do with our body.
There is nothing like being out in the streets.
Because the right to decide when and whether or not to be a mother is the front line and the bottom line of women's freedom and liberation.
It's my choice. Y no lo voy a perder. Mujeres, pasen la voz, salgan a la calle, salgamos a gritar, no voy a permitir que me quites ese derecho.
This is not a crisis that we can donate our way out of. And this is not a crisis that a one-off protest is going to solve. No. This demands sustained action. This demands noise. This requires you. We need you to stand up, to rise up, and demand that abortion remains safe, legal, on demand, and without apology.